Now, are you ready for Threads?
Yes. I mean, no, but yes.
If we start on Threads, the numbers, and it's just been insane.
It has been insane.
So the first off, and this is the worst interview question ever. You know when like someone wins Wimbledon and they're like, "How do you feel?"
I won the Wimbledon yesterday, and they asked one of the winners of this woman semis, "How do you feel?"
Yeah,
she's like,
happy.
She's like, good.
You'd love it if they were like really depressed. They only got 100 likes on my Insta.
Yeah, it's like my cat is killing me.
But one never knows when they launch a new product. You can get a lot of hate. I mean, fuck, a lot of hate.
Yeah.
Did you expect the speed of adoption for Threads?
No. I mean, I thought we had something. I think I did a pod with Kevin and Roos and Casey, and Kevin was asking questions about, like, you guys have launched a lot of separate apps and they usually don't go so well. In fact, I can't think of any. I think he said, and he's like, what do you think of this? And I said, like, look, when you're launching a new app, it's always more likely to fail than succeed. The median number of new apps, I read this somewhere, installed a month is 0 for the average person. So you're swimming upstream. But I did say I was more excited about this one than I have been about anything in a while. But I did want to recognize it was a big risk. And look, the numbers are staggering, but it's just signups. It's way easier to build something that people are willing to try than build something that people want to continue to use in a month or a year from now. So this is day 8. This is the best first 8 days I could have ever possibly imagined. But what really matters is how well do we iterate, how quickly do we improve the experience so that it is compelling enough that people will continue to use it over the long run.
We're going to get to retention. I have a group with like 10 of the best product leaders in the world in it, and
should I be offended on this?
Yes. You actually have to be on the show first.
That's fair.
But one of them said the most important question for me is, can you get him to talk about what went into bootstrapping the Threads graph from day one?
I mean, this is one of the key reasons for the success, is that you sign up and you can not only you sign in with your Instagram account. It's not a separate account. And you can import your identity, but you can also essentially import your graph by just following everyone you already follow. And you can follow people who are not even on Threads yet, so that when they do join, that you automatically are connected. And so that we can even tell you, we can be like, hey, you've got 10,000 followers on this app already. You haven't even installed it yet. Do you want to try it? It's a pretty compelling value proposition.
Sure.
And so I think that was key. Now, look, I do think the public conversation interest graph isn't necessarily the one you're the same in terms of your interest as what you follow on Instagram, which is why we allow the graphs to fork. We will build over time, I think, a graph sync option. So if you want just to have the same graph, you can, and we can make sure that it stays in sync for you. But I think it was also very important, particularly to the team, to allow people to choose a different experience or a different graph if they wanted one. And so I think we found a really good balance between making it really stupid easy to just pull everything in on day one, but also if you cared and you wanted to curate, you could go do that.
How much of an overlap do you actually think there is? I think of it as like my brain and my body, if I'm being totally honest. Body on Instagram. Instagram's my body. I've got like recipes, personal trainers, and like any body stuff. Yeah. And then Twitter's like where I gain intellectual advancement. Yeah. And so if I got a feed of like Gordon Ramsay, I'd be like,
he's on there.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I know he was on this. But how should we think about that overlap actually? And how do you actually think about it?
I think it's going to be a very personal choice. I think for a lot of people, it's just going to be easier not to have to think about it and just be like, it's 80% the same anyway. I just want you to keep in sync.
Did you think about starting again from no followers?
Yes.
What was that discussion like?
We talked about it, but we thought that for enough people, probably the majority, but not everybody, that there would be enough overlap that it would make a lot of sense to just allow you to quickly do it. Now, you can also select. You don't have to select the whole group. It just seemed like it would be the majority use case. We also, I mean, look, when we first started building separate experiences, we kept building. We built, the first two were Facebook Home, which was my first PM project, spectacular failure. and paper. And they were essentially just a repackaging of the Facebook app. So it wasn't sufficiently different that it would really give you a reason to switch. So then we're like, oh, we can't just make the same thing again. We got to make something different. So we had this Facebook Labs team, and we started building all these different things. But there wasn't a reason we should succeed in any of them. They were just like startups, which is great. But, in your world, you know this more than anyone, like the odds of success are relatively low, but if you do succeed, it's wildly amazing. But we weren't leaning into our strengths. We weren't integrating into our products. We were just kind of just throwing ideas out. And what Threads, I think, is a really nice balance where it's different enough that there's a reason for it to be a separate app, that we debated that a lot internally. But because there's a heavy overlap in terms of the interest graph between what conversations you want to be privy to and what, photos and videos you want to be keeping up with, that it really allowed us to lean into that. And I think there's no way it would have been as successful if you had to bootstrap the graph from scratch.
Tough and direct one. Someone on the show said once that, bluntly, the social graph is terrible at predicting what you like. And just because your friends like it doesn't mean you like it. And that we have totally moved away from the friend graph, and the interest graph is the future of social. Do you agree with that and that binary nature?
No, I think it's too black and white. I do think there's tension. There's a lot of tension. There's, who you care about and who you want to hear from are not the same. What you want your Instagram to be experience to be, if I ask you about it in the abstracts over the long term, is probably pretty different than what you'd like and interact with on a daily basis in the app. That's the tension between sort of first order and second order preferences. And so things are always a bit more complicated. The thing that's really working about Instagram right now with Reels is the connection between the two. So you can see a bunch of amazing videos from people you know or don't know, but aren't necessarily your friends. And then you can share them with your friends in DMs. And that brings your friends back to the app, and then they discover something, and then they might share it with someone else.
I do the send separately a lot to a lot of people, actually, and it's great.
Yeah, and so the thing that I think people don't always realize is video, by its nature as a format, is actually really challenging for all the old social networks. It puts a lot of downward pressure on the ads business, because if you watch one video for 10 seconds, you would have before, scrolled through 4 posts and probably seen an ad. And so it's a challenge. Actually, video tends to be good for time spent and bad for everything else. Bad for revenue, bad for comments, bad for likes, bad for sends, etc. What works about Reels, because we have the inbox integrated into Instagram, is this sort of flywheel where you consume things, you send them to friends, then you start a conversation. Maybe they use Instagram more. They want to check out what's going on today. They discover something, they send it back to you or to another friend. And so the fact that growing video has massively grown sends, which is a pure friend-to-friend interaction. Even if you take out the Reels shares, because they start conversations. I might send you a funny football clip, and then we talk about something else. Is really, really exciting, because everything that we did in the video space before that I was involved in at Instagram and Facebook came at the cost of people's connections, and Reels is the opposite. And I think that's so. I do think these things can be symbiotic if you design the experiences thoughtfully, but that doesn't mean there are no tensions.
So do you think Threads and Reels is kind of the integration of the interest graph and the social graph coming together in both of them, actually? In one single platform?
I think it's too early to tell on the Thread side. I think Reels is embracing that people want to consume video, even though they don't share as much video, and giving people a way to connect with friends that embraces that preference. And I think recommendations also help with that. So I think that's sort of the intersection of entertainment and connection or friends, I think, is what's kind of working there. With Threads, we'll see. We will see. It's I'm just refreshing the dashboard, making sure everything is
8 days in.
Just trying to make sure the lights are on.
Still working. there was quite an influencer strategy around this.
Yeah.
We mentioned Gordon Ramsay. The influencer activation, I saw it and I was like, Adam,
oh my God.
Sensational.
Such a shout out to the partnerships team.
Yeah, my product group was just going like, the emoji like this. Exactly. My question to you is like, how does that plan go with the influencer activation strategy? I'm just fascinated.
So when you so it was very clear, or at least our opinion, maybe it wasn't clear, but when you're starting something new, there's always a question, which is like, do you need to get people on it so that the creators will come, or do you need to get creators on it so the people will come? And my biggest fear, specifically with Threads, and I think the team had the same fear, was that people would show up and there'd just be nothing there and be like, I'm out. Seems nice. And so we learned this actually from IGTV a lot too, which is we should focus on the creator side. Because also feeds are very head heavy in general, and so is text. So basically that's to say that you have to assume that Twitter and other feed products in general tend to have most of the content is consumed by a small number. Most of the content consumed is produced by a small number of people. So even more so than stories by a lot, actually, and certainly their messaging. So we're like, okay, how do we get there to be a critical mass of content early? And we were trying to create something that was, a less angry space. And so you often, I think, in a way you can't measure, can set the tone for a product with some of the decisions you make up front. So we had always known early that we wanted to get a bunch of creators into the app early. So we actually wanted to do it for longer. We only did it for, I think it was like 40 hours before.
Wow.
And then the partnerships team did a really, really good job.
I'm sorry, I'm super naive here. Do you just like choose like J-Lo and Gordon Ramsay?
Oh yeah, no, it's not me. We have a great, small, lean, mean partnerships team, and so we picked verticals that we thought would be important because mostly we looked for verticals where they already did well on Instagram, and there was a vibrant commentary community around that. So we do great with athletes. And also, sports commentary is its own sort of genre in a way.
Should I be offended? Didn't ask.
No, yeah, you should be. Well, we weren't focusing on tech.
Not coming in my product group.
We were focusing. That's fair. I'll earn it one day. I'll have to ship a couple more things at work. No, we weren't going after tech. We weren't going after news. We weren't going after politics. We were focused on musicians. We're focused on fashion. We're focused on athletes. We're focused on beauty. We're focused on because actually all of those have these amazing, creators and personalities that people are interested in, and all these amazing commentators who talk about that world. And look, everyone's going to come. Like, we're not going to try to be an exclusive club here, but that's what we leaned into for the launch. And so the partnerships team did a really good job. Do
you pay them?
No.
You didn't pay them?
No.
Wow.
We talked about it, but no. It's not scalable. And as soon as you start, it's a very slippery slope. You have to build a platform that provides enough value to someone that they want to share if it's really going to be sustainable over the long run. Mm-hmm. It's not to say you should never pay. We've done performance-based incentives on Instagram before, and I think there are targeted ways to do it. But it's not a scalable solution. So it's got to be a way to learn or a way to bootstrap.
You do a PostMortem on this. It went very well as an influencer activation strategy.
Yes.
Why?
I think it went well for a few reasons. One is we had built a bunch of relationships. Or you're talking about specifically the creator and influencer strategy. One is that we had gotten a bunch of people ready. We actually had wanted to launch earlier, so the partnership team had already kind of engaged everyone, and then we had to delay, so they were ready at a moment's notice because we had originally wanted to be up by VidCon. That helped. I think being opinionated about the verticals helped. I think letting a bunch of people, a few thousand people in on, this was Tuesday, I think we launched Wednesday at midnight UK time, also built a huge amount of hype around it. We ended up having to pull up the launch again because on Wednesday we figured out that we did this pre-order thing on iOS just to kind of build some buzz. And we found out that we couldn't control what time the Apple App Store delivered the app to people's phones, and it would just deliver on midnight Thursday local time. So we became the #1 store in the App Store in Japan, and you couldn't log in. because it was like,
I mean, there's a product wall and there's a product wall.
It was a Wednesday morning in California, and so that's why we had to pull it up again. So we ended up being like, okay, what's the next biggest, most important country that's going to hit midnight? So we can either cancel the pre-orders, that seems terrible, or we can just pull up the launch. And so UK was the next one that was going to hit midnight, which is why it was midnight UK time that we opened the floodgates. Because otherwise, every UK footballer would have gotten the app, that had pre-ordered it, would have had the app on their phone, and they would have logged in, and it would have been like error or something terrible. And I was like, it's going to be like the worst launch of all time. And so, but that actually ended up playing to our favor, because that was like, that created more like mystery and excitement, or like it moved up, and so just the whole thing ended up playing.
Are you getting any sleep in this time?
I don't get a lot of sleep.
Just like, it feels a little bit hectic.
Yeah. The tough thing about living in the UK and working for a California-based company is the hours, and I have littles. I have a 7 and 5 and a 3-year-old boy, so that's the tough thing.
Did you sleep before, or have you just adjusted to this?
I used to sleep a lot. I slept a lot more before. I've aged a lot this year. We didn't meet each other until this year, but I had a lot less gray hair.
Dude, I think you look great.
Oh, I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I'm like a real man crush. Like the design, fantastic.
I'm into it.
And my question now is like, I spoke to someone who I consider like a consumer social OG about the influencer activation strategy, and they were like, it's like importing the landed aristocracy to the US. And actually, like, each platform, Mr. Beast on YouTube, the Kardashians on Instagram, D'Amelio on TikTok, they're like native to their own platform.
Yeah. And
this felt like importing landed aristocracy. How do you feel when you hear that? And is that right or wrong?
I don't know about aristocracy, but I think one of the things that played to our favor is there are a lot of platforms that do amazing work with creators out there. I talked about how TikTok is really good at breaking new talent. I think YouTube is the best at doing sustained, consistent payouts with their rev share program, because long form video is, I think, a lot more conducive to that. But if you look at all the different platforms, Instagram is it's the most popular in the creator community as far as we can tell. So the most creators use it. Now, more creators over time are using multiple platforms because they're becoming just more savvy and trying to make sure they diversify their risk, which I think is smart. But we have been, we're not always the most loved. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. But we've been the most important platform overall, not for an individual creator, but overall in the community, I think, for a while now. So we had this very rich, vibrant community of probably tens of millions of creators that we could just tap into with this in a way that I think was exciting. And then it ended up taking an energy of itself. As soon as you get enough big, not even big names necessarily, but like interesting names, then everyone's worried about missing out. And so then everybody tries it too, and then it creates a bit of a cycle.
Which name do you not have that you would love to have?
On Threads? Yeah. Oh, there's a bunch of people.
Like number one.
As my role or as a person?
Both.
I think a huge one will be Beyonce.
Yeah.
And in terms of my role, in terms of like cultural relevance, Taylor Nation, Swift Nation came over, but not Taylor Swift yet. But that'll also be a big deal. Her reach is insane. But for me, based on my personal interests, I'm really bummed about how long it's going to take to support Europe, because I'm a football fan and there's so many amazing footballers in Europe. So like, to me, there's obviously the market and like reaching a bunch of people. But it's also
getting Ronaldo would be amazing. Ronaldo or Messi.
Ronaldo, Messi. Well, Messi's like, maybe he'll have a U.S. account when he goes over to Miami. Ronaldo can log in from Saudi Arabia. It's totally fine. But football and F1 are so important worldwide that I care every bit as much about making sure that maybe even more, that the platform is culturally relevant than the sort of the big number of users.
What did you make of, you mentioned kind of the centrality of, kind of enabling creators. Twitter recently I've just seen screenshots on Twitter.
The payments?
Yeah, like payments for replies. I'm like, where's my fucking payment, Elon? Yeah.
I think you have to think long. I think paying, and look, creators, for a lot of creators, it's a business. And I think we've been trying to figure out ways to support those businesses for a while now. But I think you can't just pay everybody who's a creator, because if there's tens of millions of creators, that just adds up to money that's going to just completely destroy your business model. So you have to figure out ways to give them tools to make money, in my opinion. And so we focus on things like subscriptions, which are relevant to a subset of creators, but that's growing. Facilitating branded content deals, that's actually going very well on Instagram. And we do some payments as well, but that's more for bootstrapping. And then for a segment that's creating real content that's really driving a lot of incremental value and revenue for Instagram. So look, I think it's going to get a bunch of attention for the next couple of days, but I think it's hard if it's unpredictable. If you're trying to run a business, you kind of need to know roughly what you're going to make ahead of time, and if you're kind of getting these lottery type checks, I think it gets much more harder to plan. I think that's a common complaint I've heard about how TikTok's payments compare to YouTube's payments, for instance, which are much more predictable. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, look, they're trying new things. I'm excited that, I don't know where Twitter's going to be in a year. They're shaking things up in all sorts of ways over there.
Facebook had the supposed 5 friends or 6 friends was like a retained user. Yeah. Do you have a metric as such with Threads?
We don't know what the number is yet. I do think you're going to need 2 different things. You're definitely going to need a critical mass, I think, of friends, and then you're going to need a quality of, or maybe it's a critical mass on your interest graph side as well. Now, we can bootstrap you by showing you recommendations if you don't follow anyone to start on the interest side. It's much more difficult to do that on the friend side. But by the way, that number for Facebook back in the day varied wildly by country.
Huh.
Like in Japan, it was 6, and in Indonesia, it was 106 or something bonkers. Because just cultural differences, internet usage differences meant that tipping point varied drastically from country to country.
A lot of social consumer social apps get a lot of buzz. Admittedly, this has been unlike almost any other before. How do you think about retention? How do we retain a community?
It's just the primary focus. I think it's it's got to be the thing that the team focuses on for the next couple of months. I think we have to do a number of different things. We have to plug a bunch of obvious missing features.
What are the biggest missing features?
Following feed, edit button, just supporting the continent of Europe. I'm actually really excited about the Fediverse work that's coming and supporting Activity
When does Europe come?
Many months minimum.
February.
I'd be excited about that, honestly, at this point. It just requires...
What's the reasoning, sorry?
It's laws coming out next year, making sure that we're proactively compliant with them. It's about data separation, but it's also about being able to verify all of the statements you make about how data works, because we hold ourselves to very high standards on that. And if we're going to make claims, we have to make sure that we prove those claims are true, and that work is a lot. It's a lot of time. It's just a lot of time.